Speaker. I am a fighter and not a quitter. I am resigning.
Hello! Plague Von Karma here with a new episode of RBY Bytes. Been a while, hasn't it? I've owed Hypno a video for a very long time, as it's actually the last of the Pokemon that was once considered to be overused. I learned this while working on a project with a Smogon senior staff member called Phoopes, documenting the entire history of RBY's tiering. At the time of my series of videos covering the XOU crew, I didn't even know Hypno was overused before. Hell, even some old community members from the time period had just forgotten. Before we look at OU though, let's add some context. During the early days of competitive Pokemon in Japan, Hypno was weird. It saw a lot more usage than it does today, and was seen as an effective meta pick, though it wasn't top tier or anything. This made sense. Hypno is very easy to build on cartridge, Psychic types are naturally strong, and Sleep is a very powerful status. Naturally, during the early Japanese metagame of Nintendo Cup 1997, it got 2 Top Cup placements at the final event at the Space World events that year. Hiroki Yoshi used it to place 2nd, and Yoshitomi Taisei tied for 8th. However, modern interpretations of the metagame see it as decidedly poor overall. Wait, is that Ditto? Oh god, that metagame was terrible. Anyway, chances are you have never heard of OU Hypno, and well, there's a reason for that. It was overused for around a month, possibly less, and once it dropped it was largely never heard of again. During this time, a user named Justin8649 was managing the RBY tier list on Smogon, primarily doing things himself with the help of high-level players. We don't know the exact date, but Hypno rose after December 2005 and dropped in February 2006 after disputes from users like Hipmonlee. Chances are much of the discussion around Hypno's tiering status occurred on MIRC, so the debates that rose it are lost to time. Smogon's early tier lists were divided into Uber, Standard, Borderline, and Underused. Standard was effectively overused, while Borderline was a place for Pokemon that had niches and could be considered standard by at least a few people. Underused was a for fun metagame that people could play if they wanted to break from the standards, so Borderline was essentially there to make it uncontroversial. So you could say that Hypno rose for this reason. Additionally, usage stats were not used for tiering, instead of being viability based, so opinion based, which remains the case for generations 1 through 3 today. So with viability being the deciding factor, what got Hypno into overused? Let's have a look at it. So, Hypno is a bulky Psychic type with access to a plethora of support moves, including the rare combination of Hypnosis and Thunder Wave. Hell, if you're weird and don't like using good movesets, Meditate is even an option. With arguably the greatest typing in RBY to top it off, you have the makings of a very powerful Pokemon. Great typing, great move pool, high special, that's really all you need. Back in 2005 to 2006, Hypno was better because, well, the metagame was much faster paced. So, as a result, its staying power, which is much less than compared to something like Alakazam, is, well, less important. Jinx also wasn't used much at all, with Executor being the preferred sleep lead, and at this point, Executor was seeing more and more usage. Because Hypno is faster and has Hypnosis, it can put Executor to sleep before it gets anything going, forcing it out and giving the Hypno player much more momentum. This gave it the perfect anti-lead niche for the time period, and this is largely what brought it to overused. Additionally, it would often use counter to KO a Reckless Snorlax later, going 2 for 1 if everything went right. At the time, it wasn't known that sleep moves reset counter's damage storage, so Hypno could swap in on Snorlax, take a Body Slam, put it to sleep, and then get a guaranteed counter. However, once it was discovered that sleep didn't work that way, and simulators were updated to reflect this, Hypno became a bit weaker. There are a lot of other mechanical differences too. The discovery that Body Slam couldn't paralyze normal types wouldn't come for another 9 years, and thus teams at the time were significantly less bulky. Snorlax wouldn't often run Rest, Chansey sets were almost always Bolt Beam, and Persian was used far more often. Even Jinx wouldn't run Rest a lot of the time, instead of using moves like Mimic or Body Slam. With health pools being more finite because of this, and fewer Psychic types being necessary, a powerful Psychic was much better at breaking things down. Old analyses also show that people would occasionally use Hypno in place of other Psychic types for its roll compression, but this seems to be framed from a more casual perspective, and in practice, the effectiveness here is dubious. So, what went wrong for Hypno? Well, look at that niche. Anti-leading Executor. That's really, really specific and metagame dependent. In RBY's lead metagame, Exeggutor has seen a steady drop for many years. These days you'll see Gengar, Jinx, Alakazam and Starmie at least a few times before Exeggutor even comes up. Jinx is the big one though. In scenarios where you want to anti-lead Exeggutor, is there anything more convincing than Jinx? It has more consistent sleep, and once Exeggutor is put into Nicotine Shot, Blizzard forces it out, meaning something may actually get frozen as well. A very strong 1-2 punch. You could even say that Hypno becoming overused sealed the demise of its niche. When you look at its contemporaries, you'll quickly see that Hypno is outclassed. Exeggutor has more consistent access to sleep in Sleep Powder, as well as Explosion to ensure it never loses utility, even when paralysed. There's nothing wrong with playing the speed type of Exeggutor as well. You have a better Pokemon in every other matchup. Hell, Alakazam and Starmie have the always reliable Recoverer, while Hypno is stuck with Rest. In Alakazam's case, it can even wall the Pokemon Hypno wants to more effectively, chief among them being Bolt Beam Chansey. These Pokemon are so much better than Hypno, having all the moves it has and more. Ergo, Hypno is often seen as an auxiliary psychic type on teams of modern RBY, almost always being pushed out in favour of different Pokemon that aren't cancelled out by other psychic types. You could muster a vague niche in using Submission to bonk Chansey on the head, I guess, but on the other hand, the accuracy and recoil are going to really sting a Pokemon that lacks Recover in a metagame where your psychic type really needs it. Hypno isn't bad, it's just not OU material and kind of pointless. Think of it like Persian. A second Taurus is cool, but why? So in February 2006, Hypno got sat down in BL, restoring normality. It would remain there for many years. In another timeline, Hypno could have stayed OU, or even risen earlier. When Pokemon Gold and Silver were released, Hypno got a myriad of moves, such as Amnesia and the Elemental Punches. Because these moves can be sent back to Generation 1 through the Time Capsule, this makes Hypno a terrifying Pokemon to fight, and things like this spark discussions on whether Generation 2 influences should be allowed. This ended in what is now known as Tradebacks being banned from standard OU play, locking Hypno's meteoric buffs from the tier. A side metagame showing this timeline has developed though, named Tradebacks OU, allowing the petrifying Amnesia Hypno to unleash its full potential, Elemental Punches and all. Shockingly, it manages to find itself quite balanced in the tier. Its lack of reliable recovery and iffy defense once again being exploited by the likes of Tauros and Snorlax. Certainly an OU contender, but a healthy piece we can all appreciate. Experienced players often place Hypno firmly in B rank viability wise, though some argue for it to be higher. In 2010, a website called, well, RBY 2K10 popped up, aiming to re-tier RBY, including making Borderline a playable tier, while banning wrap moves. In practical terms, this would make Borderline an equivalent to Smogon underused, and as a result, what you see here largely mirrors the modern Smogon metagame.
Hey, you. You're finally awake.
Well, not anymore. Lapras is a monster. 2K10 BL would be the first time Hypno got a proper format at its power level. What happens when you remove all the psychic types outclassing Hypno? Well, you get one of the most ferocious, terrifying top tiers in the game's history. Hypno is a devastatingly strong Pokemon in anything resembling an unused tier in RBY. In 2K10 BL, Hypno would run Psychic, Thunderwave and Rest every time, but with a variable 4th slot. Body Slam was preferred for more damage against Kadabra, but moves like Counter, Hypnosis and Psychic Toss could be seen too, with Counter being a way to keep Kangaskhan and Gyarados humble. In modern Smogon UU, you'll see this moveset on screen. Nothing really checks Hypno in either metagame, forcing players into a grind game instead to wear each other's Hypno down, giving the tier some back and forth. With only Kadabra, Mr. Mime and other Hypno being around to resist Psychic, Hypno can make some fearsome offensive pushes, and its bulk is some of the best available without Pokemon like Chansey running around. You can't stop it from putting things to sleep, you can't stop it from paralysing at least one Pokemon, and any hit you strike it with means heavy damage in return. The main things holding it back are slightly squishy defense, relying on rest for recovery, and iffy speed. These issues put a firm cap on what it does, and as a result, despite its power level, it's respected as a stable top tier. If it's using rest, it'll often let Pokemon like Kangaskhan in to deal major damage, meaning it can't repeatedly rest to try and score a better situation. Setup sweepers like Swords Dance Victory Bell can also be effective. During the 2K10 era, this was a popular strategy which often led players to pair Hypno with Haunter to prevent that from getting out of hand. Hypno would continue to ravage the tier well into the Pokemon Perfect days, as the old 2K10 BL got passed around and altered until it eventually converged into Smogon's New King of Borderline entirely. This brings us to modern Underused, a tier with Pokemon like Persian available, as well as an unrestricted Tentacruel. both of which make Hypno a little uncomfortable. Lapras recently got banned for its fair trial too, but from what I can tell, this doesn't fundamentally change how Hypno plays. You could argue that these factors make Hypno significantly more balanced, but somehow it's still managed to cause some mayhem. Most notably, its usage of Hypnosis eventually began to be seen as uncompetitive, due to Hypno's moveset variety and frequent mirror matches. The 50-50s it promoted were, overall, very undesirable. These happened very often, because nothing could soak Psychics and Thunder Waves better than, well, your own Hypno. However, you didn't want to risk forfeiting your own Sleeper to a random Hypnosis or critical hit Psychic either. Additionally, turn 1 Venusaur switch-ins post-Hypnosis were also proving to be uncompetitive, and with seeing Lapras's drop into the tier imminent, Sleep as a whole got banned from the tier following a suspect test. With a new moveset available, Hypno has begun to run counter more frequently again, letting it dispatch hasty Persian and Kangaskhan that sometimes can't really afford to fish for it. You'll be surprised to know that Hypno has managed to carve itself a minor niche as a lead in Ubers. Lead Executor sees a bit more usage over there, but the real kicker is lead Taurus existing. Hypno can use counter to immediately KO it right out of the gate. Hypno can do just about anything it wants against Taurus. Its only option is to try and critical hit a Hyper Beam in a flat 1-on-1. Outside of that though, Hypno doesn't really do much that other Psychic types can't do more effectively. Alakazam is usually better. That's about all I have for Hypno's history in RBY though. This Pokemon is quite a divisive one, even outside of competitive play, having some disturbing lore and a wealth of creepypastas. Personally, I like it for that. There are a few Pokemon you could talk about at length for so many reasons. While it's thoroughly fallen from grace in modern generations, it's nice to look back on its days as low-tier menace, and it'll likely continue seeing RBY success for a good long time. I wouldn't be shocked if it eventually demands a follow-up video because of this. I'm pretty sure it's going to get banned from a tier eventually. This was Pokemon Karma, and I'll see you all next time.